As Lysandra continued to pull out new sets of clothing, Ian would look at a few of them before shaking her head. "Never mind, these won't look that nice," she would mutter, filtering out the pile, much to Shiro's relief. Eventually, they threw out roughly 40% of the pile, as the remaining ones are the ones that Ian was happy with. Most of the clothes were colored with dark blues, reds, and purples, with some even having a bit of turquoise. Thankfully, there was no pink. "Let's go with an easy one first." Ian smiled, holding up an outfit which made Shiro flinch a little. "Are we really going with this one?" Shiro asked with a forced smile. She liked her dark colors along with simple designs, but this was pure white with gold and light blue. There were flashy ornaments and designs all over the dress, which made it hard to think about where to look. "Yeah, wouldn't this look good on Mum?" Ian nodded and turned to Lysandra, who only stayed silent while putting away the clothes that Ian didn't want to pick. "Let's go with a darker to dash." "Nope. You always wear black, Mum, so try some lighter colors today." Ian grinned. Glancing into the pile of clothes that Ian had chosen, Shiro realized that hardly any of them were black. "Then how about something a bit simple then? Having all of these ornaments is not necessary." Shiro asked. She didn't mind trying new colors out, but something this flashy was not to her taste. "Really? Fine. This one is not as flashy." Ian sighed. Throwing the outfit behind her, she grabbed the next one, which almost caused Shiro to shout out the words, "Bullsh**T." While there weren't many ornaments on this dress, the main problem was that it was simply a mishmash of colors. Much like how a child would paint, it was as if someone had just thrown a bunch of colors on this dress. "How about I just choose one from this pile myself?" Shiro asked, as her daughter's taste in clothing was definitely no match for her talent in cooking. "But that's no fun." Ian furrowed her brows. "Well, Mum still needs to go talk to Aram, so maybe just let her pick one for now. We can have a look at more outfits later. Plus, didn't you need to check up on the scouts to see if they have any more news on your fragments?" Lysandra reminded, as Ian sighed. "Fine. I'll continue this later then." Sighing in relief, Shiro secretly gave Lysandra a thumbs up. ####. After an hour of going through the clothes, Shiro eventually settled on a sleeveless white and gold dress that extended all the way down to the floor. It was paired with a white silk jacket that was adorned with gold patterns around the shoulder. It was the best dress that she could find in the pile that matched her tastes, but even so, she still preferred her normal outfit. But since it was Ian that gave her this outfit, she might as well wear it for a while. "Shall we go to Aram now?" Nantion smiled as Shiro nodded. "Amen. Let's talk to her before the day ends. The quicker I can get back to using my mana, the better." Shiro nodded. "Well, I've had my fun for today. Me and Lil Sis won't bother you anymore. Come on, we've still got a stack of reports to read through," Ian said, as she seemed much happier than before. Nodding her head, Lysandra gave Shiro one last hug before leaving with Ian. "I should spend more time with them, huh? I've been neglecting the two a little." Shiro smiled softly after they left the room. "Well, you were quite busy." "Amen, but it's no excuse. Setting that aside, let's go to Aram." Shiro smiled as they left the room. As they were making their way towards the teleport node in the main tower, Shiro glanced out of the tower window and looked down at the city, which seemed to be functioning as normal. "There was a bit of unrest since you didn't make a single appearance in almost 4 months, but I had the Spirit Council and the militia help calm people down, saying that you were preparing for something else." Nantion smiled as Shiro nodded her head. "Thanks. It's good that people aren't panicking, though I suppose we haven't been accepting any more residents." "Unfortunately, no. We haven't accepted any more residents in Asharia, but Madison has been making small anchor cities outside of Asharia. They're mostly underground with pathways towards the surface, along with a few teleport nodes for them to come to Asharia for trade, but that's about it. They aren't able to stay here for an extended period, and Madison has some of her more powerful subordinates looking after the city. The people were a bit afraid of the demons at first, but they've come to accept that the demons are trying to help rather than harm them." Nantion explained while passing her the tablet with everything that Madison has done in the time she was away. Reading about all of her achievements, Shiro was impressed by how much she had accomplished. Though it seems like there have been a few people that have been trying to usurp her power in these cities. One of them was almost taken over due to new residents lusting over Asaria's resources, huh? Shiro narrowed her eyes. "Amen. But since they're sent to the subspace that you created with Estrella, they couldn't find the main city, and we were able to deal with them quickly." Nantion nodded. Everyone's worked hard, huh? Shiro chuckled. Of course. After realizing that we've been putting a lot on your shoulders, everyone decided to do their part for the city and help keep it running so that there is less stress for you. Talking to each other about the development of the city, they reached the teleport node within the tower that would send them to the second city. Stepping in, Shiro's vision flickered and they were in the main tower of the second city. There was no bright light or dizziness since they were the things that she hated about the teleports. It was instant like the snap of a finger. She couldn't help but nod at her handiwork with a smile, since it was pleasant to walk through. Let's see. Seems like she's in her office like usual. Nantion muttered. Like usual? Does she not leave her office? Shiro asked curiously. No, she doesn't. She does everything in her office, and she had even renovated it with Estrella's help so that her lab is in a separate space. Nantion shook his head. Well, I guess if you can wake up and immediately start working on your research, then I would have probably done the same. Shiro shrugged since she could understand Aram's thought process. Less time wasted after all. Making her way up the stairs towards the top of the tower, they found Aram's office. Knocking on the door, the two heard the sound of paper falling as Aram coughed. Come in, she called out. Opening the door, Shiro could see Aram behind her desk looking tired. Littered around the room were heaps of scrolls that were discarded. Shiro, are you feeling better now? Aram asked as she stood up and jogged over to Shiro. I'm feeling a bit better now. Sorry it took so long. Shiro smiled. Nonsense. Take as long as you want. We're keeping things in order right now, so you don't have to worry. Aram smiled. So what brings you here today? Aram asked, snapping her fingers and quickly cleared the table and chairs so that they could sit down and talk. I just wanted to ask you about a small problem regarding my body. You see, I can't use mana nor divine energy right now. Shiro smiled as Aram furrowed her brows. What? That's impossible. Wait, let me have a look. You should have been able to use it once your body has recovered. Knowing Sylvia, she wouldn't do a half-assed job. Aram muttered. Closing her left eye, she opened it once more as a magic circle could be seen hovering in front of her pupil. Looking at Shiro, she frowned for a moment before sitting back down. You had me worried for a moment. It's nothing major. It's just that most, or rather, all of your mana and divine energy is being directed towards your mana realm. I suppose you can say that it's evolving, which is crazy if you think about it. Since no matter what happens in the mana realm, its basic structure will remain the same. Yours is improving, refining itself. All of your mana is being used up, so if you give it a while, it should fix itself once the evolution ends. Aram chuckled and sighed in relief. Wait, really? Shiro blinked. Yup. Though on a side note, I want you to help me with something if you don't mind. Aram smiled. What is it? I want to take some photos and dress you up like back in New York. I've been so busy with magic I haven't done anything to do with fashion for a while. Seeing you wear white and gold has given me some idea. After spending the rest of the day dressing up Shiro and taking pictures, Aram found it a little strange that Shiro would need to take a break and hold on to Nantion's sleeve, but decided to not say anything for now. Phew, I'm satisfied. I haven't relaxed like this in a while. Aram stretched with a smile as she sat down on the sofa. You should rest more often if you're this fatigued. Shiro smiled. Well, isn't that rich coming from the one who rests the least out of all of us? Aram raised an eyebrow as Shiro coughed. Aren't I resting now? Yeah, but that's more to do with the fact that you can't use mana right now. I'm sure that if you could, you would be training or getting back into the swing of things now. Aram crossed her legs as Shiro shook her head. I don't know if I can fight like usual. I haven't fully gotten over my fears just yet. Shiro admitted as she glanced down at her hand. I see. Sorry for bringing it up. Aram apologized. She had to remember that this wasn't like the injuries that she had suffered before. It's fine, but I think you're right. I did have a quick spar with Nantion earlier to see if I can move like usual. I think that once I can use some mana, I'll be interested in venturing out and fighting a few monsters. Shiro smiled as Aram nodded. Talking for a little longer, both Shiro and Nantion left the office and made their way back to the main tower. They didn't want to distract Aram for too long since she's keeping the second city functioning. Upon making their way back to the main tower, Shiro glanced at the time and figured that they might as well rest up for the night. As they were walking back to Shiro's room, they saw Madison waiting outside. Yo, Madison smiled. Sup? How come you're waiting outside my door? You could have just messaged me. Shiro asked as Madison shrugged. True, but I think I should talk to you face to face about this. Madison chuckled. Well, in that case, then come on in. Opening the door to her room, Shiro gestured for Madison to sit down on the sofa. So what did you want to talk to me about? Shiro asked curiously. You see, I've gotten an invitation from demon god Makron. He invites me to go to the demon realm, and in doing so, I'll be able to become stronger. If you're wondering about how I'll be, don't worry. I'll be fine. I was a little surprised by Lyrica's choice back then, but it makes sense. Everyone has their own path to become stronger, and Lyrica has made her choice. There's an opportunity before you, so don't let my condition discourage you. Shiro smiled. She immediately knew what Madison wanted to say when she brought up the invitation. If she was to hinder her friend's progress because she felt lonely, she wouldn't be much of a friend. Plus, Nantion was here helping her. Hearing this, Madison was a little surprised before smiling. All right, it seems like I wasn't able to judge you properly. Madison chuckled as she had thought up of ways to pacify Shiro should she be unwilling, but there was no need. So, when will you be leaving? Shiro asked curiously. I think I'll be leaving either tomorrow or the day after since I still need to distribute some tasks while I'm gone. Madison replied. Just a day's time, huh? Is there anything we can do that might help you? Shiro asked as Madison shook her head. It's fine. I've already got some equipment from Helion, as well as a few magic scrolls from Aram. I'm pretty sorted right now. Madison smiled. Is that so? Let me check my skills to see if there's anything I can do to help. Maybe something that doesn't require mana since all of it is being used for my mana realm right now. Shiro said as she quickly glanced at her stat screen. She wanted to check her list to see if there's anything she could use for Madison. Most of her skills were active effects that cost mana to be used in battle, and even the ones that she had recycled only lasted for a short time. Looking at this list, Shiro couldn't help but sigh. She had been so busy leveling up she never really focused on organizing her skills, even after reaching demigod tier. But just as she glanced through the list, she saw a skill that they would mention often since it transferred her stats. She never used this early since her level was low, and it would only give additional uses per level rather than a cooldown. However, now that she looked at it again, she couldn't help but massage her eyes. Previously known as the Celestial Court, it was upgraded to Divine Court after she reached demigod status. And since she was now level 760, there were 16 available slots with 5 of them being taken up. Divine Court Appointment. You can appoint people of your choosing to take a position within your Divine Court. If they accept, they gain a passive bonus in accordance to their role. The role will be tailored to their class, and you can only appoint a certain amount of people. So far, you can appoint 16 people to be in your Divine Court. You gain 1 additional slot every 50 levels, 800, 850, 900. Currently used slots, May 16th. With how much fighting she had done, she never kept a track on the slots available and offered a role when there's someone in need of it. For example, she gave Helion the role since her experiences with blueprints and so on might help him, thus he became the court blacksmith. She offered one to Keiko and Kiyomi since they were venturing out with danger lurking around every corner. Back then she only had a few slots, so she used it on the 2 highest levels. Currently, the holders of titles in her court were Aram, Keiko, Kiyomi, Helion, and Kane. Since it doesn't cost mana, Shiro wondered if she could still appoint people into her court. Now that I think of it, with 11 slots free, I can give everyone in the party one. Not that they need it, but it'll be a helpful boost. I'm just not sure what kind of title it would give to Nantion though. I can probably give Sheena, Orin, and Akes a title each. Shiro thought to herself. She didn't want to give it to Nantion just yet since it might give him something stupid like Divine Court Therapist with how things are going right now. But now that she saw this skill, she could understand what Aram was talking about when it came to her constantly pushing herself. Now that she couldn't fight for a while, Shiro figured that it was probably a good time to go through her skills and see what she could do with them. I'm not sure if this will work, but you know how Aram has a title that links her to me in the Divine Court? Shiro asked as Madison nodded. The skill itself doesn't require mana, so I'm not sure if I can still activate it, but if it does, it'll be a decent boost to you. We can certainly give it a go. Madison nodded with a smile. Taking a deep breath, Shiro stood up and let go of Nantion's sleeve. Remembering how she would activate the skill, Shiro stuck out her hand as she opened her mouth. Madison, on my authority as the nanotech demigoddess, do you accept a role in my court? Do note that once this is done, the role cannot be revoked. Shiro asked as small motes of light started to gather. There was no movement of mana or divine energy within her body, but the ambient mana provided by her anchor was being drawn towards her. Those outside would be able to see Shiro's anchor flicker and glow as some kneeled down to pray. Watching the motes gathered towards her hand and form the staff used for this ritual, Shiro was a little surprised. It felt as though the world around her was part of her body. All of the mana could be used, and it didn't need to go through her links at all. She felt as though her control was all-encompassing. She wondered if this is what it meant to be a demigod, but she set that aside for now. She had plenty of time to sit down and reflect on all the changes in her body and class, but right now she had to finish the ritual. I accept. Madison nodded as the motes of light transformed into a magic circle beneath Madison. Acknowledgement received. Generating role. Divine Court Berserker. Divine Court Berserker. The person given this role will receive the following benefits. Plus 20% of goddess strength, agility, vitality, and defense. Plus 30% all element resistance. Plus 30% damage absorption when activating a berserk skill. Plus 50% overall stats when activating berserk skill. As a divine court berserker, you are an unstoppable champion of destruction. Allies following behind you when you act as vanguard will receive a 20% boost to their stats. This skill costs no mana. Madison asked as her right eye twitched slightly. Yup, now that 6 of the slots are filled, I can give this to 10 more people. Shiro smiled. Who are you planning to give them to? Madison asked curiously. Right now I'm thinking of giving it to everyone in the party. Ian, Lysandra, Chinyu, Sylvia, Estrella, Nimue, Addie, Izul, Nantion, and then one more person. Probably Sheena, since she's the best user of the mechs right now. Shiro replied as Madison nodded her head. How are the titles even generated? Do you do them, or does the system calculate it? The system does. That's why I'm not sure about giving it to Nantion just yet, since he might become the divine court therapist. Shiro joked as Nantion chuckled. Perhaps, but I'm not exactly in need of a boost right now, so you can use my slot for others. Since they receive a portion of your stats, having more people near out level will be helpful. Nantion suggested. True. Talking for a little longer, Madison eventually excused herself since she still had to prepare for her departure tomorrow. Sighing softly, Shiro face planted into her bed as she closed her eyes. Are you feeling better now? Nantion asked as he could tell that Shiro was tense despite her responses earlier. Was I that easy to read? Shiro asked with a small smile. It is when you grip on my sleeve with such force. You're worried about her safety, aren't you? Nantion asked as Shiro nodded her head. Amen. I'm scared that she might run into trouble in the demon realm. This is an invitation given to her by a Tier 8 being. What if there are existences like the Watchman where she is going? Shiro said as she turned her head and glanced at Nantion. Amen, I'm sure her ancestor wouldn't send her to her death. After all, they're both connected to one another. Nantion replied as he pulled out a cup of juice and offered it to Shiro. Thanks. Shiro sat up and received the juice. Sipping it slowly, she took a moment to calm herself. So what's the plan now? Your mana is being used for evolution, so it's not something we can fix immediately. Nantion asked as he sat down next to her bed. I don't know. Maybe I should use the guns to do a bit of hunting. Right now, I'm on a time limit during combat. I don't know how long I can fight for when I'm not next to you. Shiro said as she looked down on her hand. I want to know how long I can fight before I lose my cool. I see you're right. Do you want to test this tomorrow then? Since it's getting pretty late now. Nantion asked as Shiro nodded her head. Sure. I haven't asked, but aren't you uncomfortable? Uncomfortable about what? Me always grabbing onto you. You don't leave when I sleep, nor do you leave my side for a long period of time, so I was wondering if I was hindering you. Shiro asked, but Nantion shook his head. It's not a hindrance, don't worry. It took a bit of getting used to, but now I can sleep on a chair without any problems. Nantion smiled. Though he hadn't had proper rest in a while. Most of the time, he would be able to wake up in an instant should there be movement. He didn't want to be in deep sleep while she woke up in a panic after all. Are you sure? You look tired though. Shiro asked as Nantion shook his head. It's fine. Hearing this, Shiro furrowed her brows before biting her lip. Shuffling over on her bed, she made enough room so that Nantion could lay down too. Mn. Raising his eyebrow, Nantion saw that Shiro had turned her back to him while still holding onto his sleeve. What are you doing? Isn't it better to sleep in the middle? Nantion asked curiously. Don't make me say it. It's embarrassing. Shiro replied without turning around at all and gave his sleeve a tug. Looking at the empty space for a moment, he realized what she had meant and nodded. All right, thank you. He smiled. Sitting on the bed, he continued to work, but it was indeed more comfortable than the chair. Meanwhile, Shiro couldn't fall asleep at all. She could feel her face heating up. Shaking her head, she forced her eyes shut and tried her best to sleep. Is it hard to sleep with me being here? If so, I can do my work on the chair. It's no trouble. Nantion asked as Shiro coughed. It's fine. You need rest too. I'll sleep eventually. Shiro replied while glancing back. Seeing this, Nantion smiled and nodded his head. Eventually, Shiro managed to fall asleep despite how long it took. ###. Pathetic. Her voice scorned as Shiro glanced up at a figure standing on what seemed to be a building. Seeing that it was herself, Shiro sighed. Are you here to haunt me like always? Shiro asked as she knew that this was a part of herself. It was the part that hated what she had become now. And what if I am? What if I'm not? There's no point haunting you since you're already discouraging yourself. What's with that act during the talk with Maddie? Don't let my condition discourage you. Lies just flow out of your mouth like nothing, huh? Just admit that you want all of their company. You don't want any of them to go, do you? Of course not. I'm selfish like that. But at the end of the day, it's still their decision. Like how parents eventually watch their children leave the house. I'm seeing both Madison and Lyrica grow up. I'm sad, but at the same time I'm proud. I know that you're trying to find more reasons to blame myself, since that will help alleviate our guilt to some degree. I don't know if I can ever get rid of you, but you should make yourself comfortable. I'm blaming myself, but I won't let my guilt drag down those two. Shiro smiled as she looked down at her feet and saw a reflection of herself on the mirror-like surface. Hearing her response, her reflection that stood on top of the building glared at her in anger as she dashed down and grabbed Shiro by the collar. What if they get killed? What if they get hunted down by a similar being like the Watchman? Are you really fine with sending them out like that? Her reflection glared at her as Shiro could see a mixture of fear and anger. Is that how I looked when Lyrica left? No wonder Maddie wanted to talk to me first. Shiro smiled softly as her reflection tensed up before punching her across the face. Stumbling back, Shiro kept her smile on her face as she looked at her reflection. See you next time, I suppose. Hearing this, her reflection gritted her teeth and spat on the floor before dispersing into mist. Seeing that she was alone now, Shiro leaned back and looked up at the sky. Yeah, I'm scared. Shiro admitted as she could almost imagine a scene of Lyrica and Madison's corpse around her as she wouldn't be able to make it to their rescue in time. Shaking her head, she wondered about what she could have done. Thinking back to the young lad she met in the dungeon, a small smile formed on her face. Vaughn was able to pause time and rescue me from the beasts in that dungeon. I could do the same. I might have been able to isolate the Watchman so that I could drag him away. Shiro muttered as she sat up and closed her eyes. Opening them again, she understood her next main goal. It wasn't to complete the event, but rather understand and utilize the concept of time. Waking up, Shiro glanced to her side and saw that Nantion was resting. Sitting up, she looked at her system and opened her mouth. Kronos, do I have the potential to utilize the power of time? Waiting a moment, Shiro kept her eye on the system as a single flickering notification could be seen. It was a simple message, but Shiro knew that to send it after what had happened, the price must have been quite big. But this message was enough for her. Yes, you do. With Kronos' confirmation that she did indeed have a potential for stopping time, Shiro closed her eyes and leaned back. With her potential being confirmed, it was just a matter of how she could accomplish this. She hoped that she'd be able to do this by the end of the month in time for the next event, but it was quite the tall order even for her. Trying to utilize a powerful concept such as time was no easy feat. Unlike light, fire, water, and so on, time was much harder to grasp. Stopping an individual time was easy enough since she could explain that Kaitoma did something similar, pausing her enemy's time for a split moment to allow her to attack. But that wasn't what she wanted. Her goal was to be able to pause time within a certain area, or perhaps the entire world. It was so that she could still affect the world while everything was in pause time. But so far, the only one who could do this is Kronos. His mastery even allowed him to turn back time so that she could warn herself. If she wanted to learn how to stop time, Kronos would be the best teacher. But the gods are having trouble contacting me since the system has restrictions. Shiro furrowed her brows as this backlash might last for a while. As she was contemplating about this, she felt some movement beside her as Nantian opened his eyes and yawned slightly. "Are you okay? You seem a little restless," he asked while sitting up. "Emin? Yeah, I'm just thinking about what to do. Now hear me out. I have a plan, but it's a bit tough to execute." Shiro smiled as she sat with her legs crossed. Seeing the excited glimmer in her eyes, Nantian couldn't help but chuckle since Shiro was the happiest when she talked about things to do with combat. "Oh, how tough are we talking about?" Nantian asked with curiosity. "This is something that will most likely require the help of Chonos, primordial god of time. I want to be able to obtain the power to pause time and move within that moment so that I can cross large distances or save people while the world is paused." Shiro replied with a smile. "Pause time? That's quite the feat. Do you have an idea on how to do it?" "A little, but like I said, I think I need Kronos' help. But with the system backlash, messaging me must be pretty difficult. However, despite that, Kronos has confirmed that I have the potential, so it's just a matter of figuring it out myself or having him help me," Shiro explained as Nantian paused for a moment. "But you can't use mana or divine energy right now, can you?" "I have an idea or two, but they require you to use a large amount of mana and divine energy. From what I know, divine energy allows you to control that of which is more conceptual in nature, such as souls, space, and so on. Spells that use divine energy are much more powerful since they deal with the core of the element, whereas mana is limiting in nature compared to divine energy. While there are exceptions, it is generally much harder to tap into the core of the concept with just mana. The first option that you can use is harnessing divine energy to adjust the flow or river of time. With the system's integration into this world, what we used to know as myths and legends now exist, which means the river of time also exists. The first possibility is for you to directly affect the river using divine energy. The second option that I thought up of was to create your own catalyst. Like how some mages have an image in mind when using their divinity, you could potentially create a catalyst that will help you connect to the river of time. For example, an hourglass would be perfect for this. Tilting it upside down could be a mental note for reversing time, and holding it horizontally is pausing time, Nantian suggested as Shiro sat speechlessly. "Seems like I don't even need to say anything." Shiro shrugged as she chuckled. "But yes, you're right. My main goal is to use option 1 if I can, since it's more diverse. Not having a mental note would make it much harder for the enemy to interrupt, and if I become too dependent on this cue, it would become a weakness instead. The only problem now is using my divine energy and asking Kronos for some guidance, since this would take years should I have to study it by myself," Shiro admitted as she scratched her hair. "Perhaps you can upgrade your authority and contact them instead," Nantian suggested, since the cooldown for her blessing should have ended by now. "Right, but that's on a time limit itself, no?" Administrator 4 did mention that if I still have something granted by this upgrade after the time limit is over, I'll suffer a backlash. Hence why we didn't keep the map last time, which didn't matter too much thanks to my memory. But this is a different problem. I don't know how much I'll be able to learn from Kronos in this time." Shiro furrowed her brows. However, just as she thought of this, she realized something. "Wait, what if I send an avatar to him? Get him to use his divinity to pause time in his own domain so that I can study it?" Shiro muttered. "That could work, but you also have to think about the system in that it wouldn't let you have something like this so easily. There's a high chance that the time would be directly linked to you, so it will continue to tick down even if you are in pause time," Nantian reminded as Shiro frowned. "MN, that is a bit annoying. Wait, what if I get Kronos to send the information to me from the future like what happened at the first event?" Shiro asked as Nantian thought about it for a moment before nodding his head. "It's possible, but that was with the use of a rainbow relic. It's a catalyst that allows the god to demonstrate a large majority of their power without backlash. After what happened, I bet that there is an 80% chance of this backlash being huge. Arg. So annoying. Shiro scratched her hair in annoyance as not being able to converse with a god is a little problematic for her right now, especially since she needed Chronos' help. How about we do it like this? I'll spend 2 days thinking about what I can do right now, and if I don't make any progress, we'll wing it with the authority upgrade. Shiro said as Nantion nodded his head. Sounds good. But what can we do in 2 days without mana or divine energy? Nantion asked as Shiro chuckled. Just transfer me some mana, and I'll experiment. Even though my mana realm is draining me dry of mana, we just need you to funnel your mana into me before it is drained, and I can use it to practice. Shiro grinned as Nantion raised his eyebrow. If we're going to go with that, it might be better for Aram to help since she has a bigger mana pool than me if you include the boost that you had given her. Having her help would increase the success rate, I suppose. Nantion reminded as Shiro nodded her head. I think that if we get her to send me some mana crystals that she created herself, I should be able to work out the amount of mana needed to offset the drain from my mana realm. Hopping off the bed, Shiro dragged Nantion to the food hall for some breakfast before making their way to Aram. After explaining their plan, Aram only had one reaction, and that was to face palm. So let me get this straight. You want to see if you can use time before the event starts? Yup. Shiro nodded. And you want to do 2 days of practice before risking yourself to meet a god so that he can give you guidance? Yup. And using the skill to meet the god might have a backlash depending on what happens. Indeed. Do I have to break your limbs myself for you to stay still even for a little while? Forget it. I'll send you the mana crystals. How many do you need? Aram asked as she sighed, giving up on trying to persuade a Shiro who had made up her mind. Probably all of the mana you can provide within 24 hours for 2 days. Shiro smiled as Aram dropped her pen. Closing her eyes, she took a deep breath before sighing. Well, it's not like I didn't lack sleep already. All right, I'll send you the mana crystals when they are ready. Aram agreed as she ushered the two out of her office. Sitting on her chair, her lips curved up into a smile. Seems like I'll be extremely busy for 2 days. With Aram providing all of the mana she could along with using some of the potions she had in stock, Shiro tried her best to find a way to control time using just mana, but it was extremely difficult. Trying to interact with something that you don't know about was surprisingly quite difficult. Scratching her hair in frustration, Shiro sighed and threw her body back on the bed. Annoying. I like experimenting, but not when no results can be found. Shiro complained with an annoyed expression. Well, I suppose you haven't experienced interacting with time properly yet, have you? It makes sense that it's difficult. Nantion smiled as Shiro huffed. I know, but like it shouldn't be that hard, right? I wouldn't say that I've mastered spatial control, but I can still teleport around like nothing. Time and space are linked, no. Shiro said as she snapped her finger and opened up a small portal to the food hall. Grabbing some juice, she offered Nantion one before sitting up properly. Well, what you're trying to do is reach out to the core concept. Your teleportation is more dimension-based than actual space manipulation. Actual space manipulation would be subjecting reality to your control. Nantion chuckled as Shiro pouted, but nodded her head since she understood that. For space, at least you have somewhat of an idea since you have your dimensions, but this time you're reaching into the dark. I think it's better for you to get some help from Chronos, just so that we don't waste too much time. Even if you are limited by how long you're allowed to get his help by the system, it's better than nothing. Hearing this, Shiro scratched her hair, but sighing in defeat. Fine, I'll call for his help, but not yet. First of all, I don't want to waste the chance of raising my authority, so I want us to list out a bunch of questions that we want to ask first. MN, what's on your mind first? Nantion asked. First question is it possible for me to retrieve Isilia and Edvamar? I don't know about fighting the Watchmen, but I want to know if I can bring them back. Shiro said as she could feel her arm shake. Holding onto it to keep it steady, she took a deep breath. The second question would be an updated map of the world followed by what the beyond is. There's a dragon guarding it right now, so I won't teleport just yet. I also want to ask the system about future events, perhaps the reward for this event, and a leaderboard of such that includes all the queens. What if you ask it about time control? Do you think it'll give you a good enough hint or maybe a method? Nantion asked as Shiro nodded her head. That's true. Anything else we want to think about? How about a method to return one after they fall? I don't want to be negative, but you've come close, and I want to find a method other than harming you, since that will put an end to everything. Nantion asked as he started at Shiro in seriousness. He didn't want to raise his sword against Shiro, so if there was a method to prevent all this, then he was all ears. That's a good one. If we find it out, we might also find a way to help Lysandra. Shiro smiled, but her expectations were quite low. If Lysandra kept her black wings in the future, then there was a good chance that they couldn't stop it. But since things were different right now, there was always a possibility. Is that everything we want to ask? I also need to think about the time limit since I won't be able to ask too much from the system. Shiro asked as she made a mental note on everything so far. A time frame on when the second part of the new age arrives, I suppose. But that's a lot of questions already, so we'll stick with what we have, I guess. We can't get too greedy since in that time you still need to get guidance from Kronos. Nantion reminded. You hear that, Kronos? I'll ask you for guidance in around an hour or so. At least then you'll have some time to prepare. Shiro called out with a smile as she laid on the bed. Looking up at her ceiling, she couldn't help but wonder about the authority. Despite raising it up to the level of chaos, it seems as though there were still more levels. Most of the important information on everything is hidden in that upper section, and Shiro couldn't help but wonder what kind of being has access to this. Are you worried about something? Nantion asked as Shiro shook her head. Not really. Just thinking what kind of being is above chaos, since it's clear that her authority is not the highest, and I doubt that it's the second highest as well, since she is also suffering from the system. Shiro replied as Nantion raised an eyebrow. Wouldn't that just be the creator then? Though perhaps the administrators are a little higher? Maybe a good question would be to ask about those that are below chaos authority level. If the administrators aren't there, then that means they're above chaos. Nantion suggested as Shiro agreed. Waiting patiently for an hour and a half, Shiro grabbed a few snacks from the food hall since there wasn't much that she had to do. Feeling her phone vibrate, Shiro smiled before standing up. Time's up. Let's see. How do we do this again? She muttered as she scanned her system interface. Tapping the skill, Blessing of Chaos, Shiro took a deep breath before activating it. Suddenly, a pillar of divine energy shot up into the sky as the room was filled with divine energy once more. Countless Tier 8 magic circles appeared around her before dispersing into motes of light. All restrictions have been lifted for entity, Shiro Dash. Authority has been upgraded to level 12. Unfortunately, due to the current backlash, time during this state has been reduced to 1 hour from the initial 2 hours. It's a pleasure to speak to you again. What would you like to do today? Hearing that she only had 1 hour with this skill due to her backlash, Shiro widened her eyes. Spare the chit-chat. First show me a map of the current world along with territories of powerful monsters and the domain of queens. Understood. Once again, I have to remind you that I cannot reveal detailed information about the Qui Dash. Potato. If you can do it, then do it. If you can't, then leave it out. After showing me the map, I want you to answer me this question. Is it possible for me to retrieve Isilia and Edvamar? Shiro asked as she waved her hand dismissively. While it may be possible for entity Edvamar, it is a difficult task to retrieve entity Isilia, as the entity watchman has already claimed her soul and placed it back into its rightful place. The system replied as a map was displayed in front of her. Hearing this, Shiro clicked her tongue, but it was okay since she had some hope. The system told her that it is a difficult task, but not impossible. However, just like how a little had a different meaning in her vocabulary, difficult had a different meaning in the system's vocabulary. She could assume that difficult means that she has to probably reach Godhead first. Alright, next, what is the Beyond? The Beyond is a unique realm located between the fabrics of reality. If everything in the world, including dimensions like the Rift, is grouped up into a circle, the Beyond is outside of this circle. There are small pathways that open up to the Beyond occasionally, but they are guarded by powerful beasts due to the mana density. Can you tell me what's in the Beyond? Shiro asked with a frown since she knew that a mana-dense area like the top of Astral Horizons was a hot spot for powerful monsters. She wanted to know what she was getting herself into before trying to potentially fight a dragon that could kill her with a sneeze. That information is redacted. I apologize. Tisk, forget it. Is a method to return those that fall. There are no known methods as of yet. If there are no known methods, then that means it isn't impossible to help people after they fall, but no one knows how to. Shiro thought to herself as she furrowed her brows. The information she wanted was either redacted or nothing could be done. It annoyed her, but there wasn't much she could do. How long is it till the second half of the new age? Redacted. But the second half of the new age will commence once the garden is ready. No sh*t. Can you give me information on the events in the future? Redacted. Can you tell me anything other than redacted? I have an authority level of 12 for the love of God. Shiro's smile twitched. Yes, but level 12 is not the limit. Heism. If I keep talking to you, I'm going to be tugging out my hair. Shiro face-palmed. Help me project an avatar to Kronos. Understood. Opening her eyes, Shiro felt her body tense up for a moment. Remembering that this was just an avatar and that her real body was next to Nantion, Shiro sighed in relief before looking around her. She expected to see the familiar landscape of Tartarus, but all that she saw was countless craters in the ground and large fissures stretching as far as the eye could see. A malefic aura shrouded the skies as it gave Shiro the chills. Looking at some of the fissures which she recognized to contain the aura of the watchman, Shiro's breathing hastened. Taking a step back, she wanted to find the table where all the gods were sitting around, but nothing of the sort could be seen. Kronos, Nyx, Gaia, Uranus, Tartarus. Shiro shouted out their names as she couldn't see any of them. Right after she called out for them, she felt divine energy spike behind her as a portal opened up. When you said that you were coming, I thought that you'd make an avatar next to us, but it seems like you appeared at the old meeting spot instead. Kronos chuckled as Shiro could see that he was injured. His aura was noticeably weaker than before. What happened? Shiro asked with a frown as this looked nothing like the old gathering spot. Come with me first. I'll tell you what happened once we're away from here. Even if you're using an avatar, if this avatar is killed, you'll take a bit of damage. Kronos ushered her towards the portal. Hearing this, Shiro furrowed her brows, but nodded her head regardless. Stepping into the portal, she saw that she was brought to a mirror realm of sorts that's a reflection of reality. Within this realm, she could see all of the gods that she was familiar with, but their state was not good. Nyx was currently laying in a bed with a pale face. Her wounds were healed, but a dark aura seeped out from them. Hemera was next to Nyx, and she was in a similar situation. Tartarus was missing an arm as runes could be seen trying to spread to the rest of his body, but it was being forcefully restrained by Uranus. As for Gaia, she was the most injured. Half of her body was being hidden by plants, but judging the aura being emanated by the plants, Shiro knew that it was trying its best to heal Gaia's body. What happened? Shiro asked as she couldn't believe that this could even happen to the primordial gods. Heis, let me explain from the beginning. Kronos sighed at the sight of Gaia. Just as he sat down to explain, Gaia's eyes twitched open as she saw Shiro standing in front of them with a worried expression. Seems like we've let you see a shameful side of us despite our boasting. Aha. Gaia forced a smile. Don't talk, old woman. Save your strength. Keep going and you'll die for good. Uranus snapped as Gaia shrugged. All right. I was just going to tell Shiro that she doesn't need to worry about us since we're gods. Gaia chuckled before flinching. I'll let the others explain. She smiled towards Shiro and closed her eyes once more. Seeing this, Shiro glanced towards Kronos, who gestured for her to sit down. Right then, where should I start? How about when the watchman returned with Isilia and Edvamar's soul? Kronos said as Shiro tightened her grip on her skirt at the mention of the watchman. If Kronos wanted to start from there, then Shiro knew that this was probably her fault. Knowing Gaia's nature, she probably charged head first after she saw what had happened. Opening his mouth, Kronos started to recall the events that happened. Hashtag. Nyx, Tartarus, Gaia shouted out as a vein was threatening to burst. Her aura was completely wild as the two gods could see that she was completely furious. I know. Nyx nodded her head as her face was cold. Hemera was next to her as Nyx couldn't forgive the watchman for both harming her daughter and Shiro. I'll try to wrestle the souls from his grasp, don't worry. Tartarus reassured as he had already donned his war armor crafted by Hephaestus himself. Without a moment of delay, the three stepped out as a portal opened in front of them. Seeing the figure, the three furrowed their brows. Hades stood in front of them with a smile. If you don't mind, I would love to join, he offered as Gaia nodded. All right, the more the merrier. Kronos, Aurenos, you two protect this place in case some little sh*ts decide to attack. I need you two to protect Hemera, Gaia ordered as the two nodded their heads. Slamming her hand down, a giant Tier 8 magic circle opened as warnings blared across her system interface. Piss off, she howled. Suddenly, stars lit up as the magic circle started to twist and turn. Recognizing it to be a kind of divination, Hades watched as he summoned his spear. Slowly, vines started to burst out from the ground as they weaved together to form a portal of sorts. Stepping through, Gaia teleported everyone to the Watchman's realm as there was a glowing sigil above the Watchman's body. You do realize that by doing this you are bound to suffer a great backlash. I am protected at this moment since I am completing a mission. The Watchman narrowed his eyes as he realized what Gaia had done back on Earth. She forcefully used her divinity to make him forget his hostility towards Shiro, which in turn caused him to spare her. So what? Does this face look like it gives a single sh*T? All you need to know is that I am absolutely livid right now. Now come here and present your head to this goddess. Gaia retorted as she immediately charged forward with Nyx and Tartarus covering her flank. Stomping down, a Tier 8 magic circle appeared as a forest immediately sprouted around the realm. Jumping back, the Watchman summoned his weapon and opened his mouth. Wither, destroying the plants around him, he furrowed his brows since they were more resilient than he had expected. You're against 4 gods. Don't think you'll have an easy time. Nyx's voice whispered in his ear as his senses were immediately cut off. Losing sight of his enemies, he widened his eyes as Tartarus and Hades threw their weapons towards. Piercing his body, the Watchman could feel the weapon hooking onto his soul as blood flowed out his mouth. Taking a deep breath, he stabbed his sword into the ground. But before he could activate his spell, roots pierced his arms as divine energy drained from him in an instant, canceling his spell. Gritting his teeth, he could only sense his soul being dragged away as he tried to bite his finger. Gah! Kicking the Watchman in the throat, Hades prevented him from doing anything as he pinned him against the ground. Scanning the flasks on his body, he quickly spotted the 2 that housed the souls of Isilia and Edvamar. Reaching towards them, red lightning suddenly flickered off the Watchman's body as both Hades and Tartarus were repelled. Enough of your insolence. The Watchman glared, cleansing himself of any negative effects. Feeling her spells being broken, Nyx narrowed her eyes and slammed her hand down. Black mist erupted out around her as her figure became blurred. An array of Tier 8 magic circles appeared above them as it blocked out the skies. Narrowing his eyes, the Watchman slammed his sword down as he was about to cast a spell, but his movements were interrupted by Gaia once more as she provided support from the backlands. However, before Nyx's spell could activate, countless motes of light appeared in the sky as they shattered her magic circles to pieces. Ripping apart the realms, a wave of light cleaved towards Nyx as both Gaia and Tartarus activated their spells to help her. Plants and darkness weaved together as Nyx managed to dodge the attack at the last moment. Materializing next to Gaia, Nyx glared at the sky and saw 2 figures that she knew Shiro detested to the bottom of her heart. Both deities ruled over light, as one had betrayed Shiro before. Seeing the 2, Nyx realized that the system probably offered them a mission since they were the ones that broke the rules first. Now isn't this just perfect? If I can get rid of you now, Nitri will lose a few of her major backers. Ikari narrowed his eyes as he could feel the hostility of all 4 gods, but he didn't waver at all. Shut the F***ck up, you boot-licking piece of sh**t. There's no spot for you here. Gaia cursed out towards him as Tier 8 magic circles appeared around Ikari. Since they were both deities of light, she was the best to deal with them since light will only empower her divinity. But before her plants could reach them, flaming swords slashed apart her magic circle as more portals appeared. Realizing that more gods were being summoned, Gaia glared towards the Watchman. This seems bad, but let me give you some words of encouragement, I suppose. Gaia forced a grin. Taking a deep breath, she opened her mouth. F***ck? Sh**t. Up. Rallying to her call, all three gods charged towards their enemies, breaking the rules and forcefully unleashed their true form. Nyx and Tartarus acted as the vanguard while Hades would provide them with support along with Gaia. Gaia dealt with both Ikari and the light goddess beside him, while Nyx, Tartarus worked together to push back the other gods. Unfortunately, they were severely outnumbered, and even if they were the primordial gods, it was still hard to kill the Watchman when he was being protected by the gods. Instead of standing on the front line, the Watchman would use his magic to hinder Nyx's movements. Their battle raged on for hours until they were forced out of the Watchman's realm. Chasing them into the pits of Tartarus, the gods didn't stop their advance. *T. This stupid system. Gaia cursed as she continued to summon forests to hinder their advances, but they managed to destroy the forests with a single attack. Her forte was not combat, but in supporting strong combatants, so it was futile to think that she could hold off the combined power of a small army of gods. Biting her lips, Nyx tried to think of a way to dissolve this situation since it was clear that they weren't going to be able to kill the Watchman today. But even if they wanted to retreat, trying to run from this group of gods was going to be no easy feat. Watching his realm get destroyed with each attack, Tartarus couldn't help but grit his teeth, as this was essentially his home. Tartarus, I know what you're thinking. Let me do it. My divinity is best in this situation rather than just fighting. Gaia narrowed her eyes, as she has known Tartarus for a long time and knew that he was planning to destroy all of his restrictions to fight at full force. But, furrowing his brows, Tartarus knew that it was the truth, but in doing so, Gaia would receive a huge backlash since there were a lot of gods involved. If she wanted to pacify everyone, it would be hard. If nothing else, help me by transferring a bit of divine energy. Gaia chuckled as she slammed her hand down. A Tier 8 magic circle expanded out as her aura intensified. Seeing that there was no convincing her, Tartarus was about to transfer his divine energy when he noticed a shadow flicker next to them. Widening his eyes, he quickly dashed in front of Gaia and tried to block the attack. *Pushii. There was a single flicker of purple light, and his arm was obliterated. Feeling corruption spreading to the rest of his body, he quickly used his divine energy to halt its advances. Glancing up, he saw that it was the light goddess. Her eyes narrowed towards him as her sword continued to pulse with a dark energy, as though it was alive. Amidst. No matter. She muttered before twisting her body, kicked Tartarus out of the way since he was being restrained by the sword's curse. However, before she could attack Gaia, she felt danger behind her as Nyx grabbed her head and slammed her into the ground. Sending the two of them into her own personal realm, Nyx wasn't about to let this woman hurt Gaia. I'm just a distraction. The light goddess smiled as Nyx quickly looked up and saw Ikari flickering in front of Gaia with a similar sword to the light goddess. Letting go of the light goddess, Nyx wanted to go help Gaia when she felt a searing pain on her back. Glancing back with anger, she could see the light goddess unleashing her power as 3 pairs of wings unfurled behind her. Her light cut through the darkness as her blonde hair fluttered behind her. Waving the sword in her hand, she slashed towards Nyx in an attempt to slow her down so Ikari could kill Gaia. You're overstepping your bounds, lowly god, Nyx declared coldly as her figure melted into the darkness. Before the light goddess realized, several spears of darkness had already pierced her body as wounds appeared all around her body. Widening her eyes, she quickly healed herself, but it was no use. The damage continued to pile on as she noticed that Nyx was trying to search for her core. Understanding that this was bad, she wanted to find a way out, but Nyx's darkness was like sludge that never let go. It continued to attach itself to her body and dragged her deeper. Struggling upwards, she suddenly found herself in the middle of a temple. Looking around in confusion, her eyes widened when she realized where this was. Why are you still standing around idly? There's plenty of work to do. A voice called out as Arya felt a chill down her spine. Turning back slowly, she could see Nitri staring at her with a frown. It wasn't the same Nitri that Ikari knew, nor was it the one that the primordial gods understood. Rather, it was one that she remembered. It was the cause of her fear buried deep in her heart. Before the vision could continue, Arya gritted her teeth and summoned a sword. Piercing it into her own chest, runes spread across her body. Shattering the illusion, Arya glared at Nyx, who was a little taken back by what she had just seen. Stabbing her sword down, a Tier 9 magic circle opened up as Nyx was taken off guard. Asterisk bang. While her domain was shattering, Nyx's body was flung back as she crashed against the ground and coughed up some blood. Forcing herself to stand up, Nyx looked at Arya, who was now walking towards Gaia. "What's your relation with Shiro?" she asked, as the Shiro in the vision was completely foreign. It wasn't the Nitri that Shiro remembers either, since she had barely seen Arya, never mind talking to her in that tone of voice. "None of your business," Arya replied as dashed towards Gaia, who was fending off Ikari. Seeing that Arya was coming to assist Ikari, Gaia gritted her teeth in annoyance. Taking a deep breath, she decided to take a few hits so that she could drive away the gods. Clasping her hands together, her aura flared as Ikari's sword pierced her shoulder. However, her goal has already been reached as her domain expanded out. Filling Tartarus with a field of flowers, the gods seemed to look around in confusion before holding their heads. They didn't know why they were here, but one by one they began to leave. The watchman managed to break out of it quickly, but he knew that it was going to be difficult for him to do anything, so he returned back to his realm. As for both Ikari and Arya, Gaia made sure to plant some trackers on them using her plants. Once the last god left, Gaia sighed in relief before collapsing on the ground. Corruptive runes started to spread throughout her body as she knew that she had to either halt their progress or get rid of them. But since she was stabbed in the shoulder, she'll have to get rid of her entire left side, or else the situation might become worse. Gritting her teeth, she sat up and summoned a few bladed plants and carved away at her own body before patching herself up. ####. After that battle, we had to relocate into this realm. Tartarus is finding a way to counter the runes for next time, hence why he's keeping the injury, but Gaia is currently healing herself. The runes reduced healing effectiveness, so it might take her a while. It's been a few months, but her body is still in this state. Kronos sighed as he looked towards Gaia. Staying silent, Shiro tried to digest all of the information, but she was confused about one thing. Arya's vision, the source of her fear, was herself? Nyx's spell would have forcefully caused Arya to confront her fear and hinder her for a bit, but they didn't expect to see a Nitri that Shiro didn't know of. Plus, the fact that Arya was somehow able to use a Tier 9 magic circle was also a cause of concern, because that means she has discovered something beyond the level of a primordial god. With someone like that as her enemy, it was going to be tough. She couldn't even fight the Watchman, much less someone with the power of Tier 9. Looking at her hands, Shiro closed her eyes before looking at Gaia, who was still recovering. While setting that aside, we've used quite a bit of time explaining what happened, so I'll be helping you discover the concept of time so that you can use it. Follow me. Kronos smiled as he stood up. Opening a portal, he gestured for her to follow him as Shiro nodded her head. Glancing back one more time, she stepped into the portal. The moment she entered the portal, she could see her surroundings weaving together and fusing before breaking apart once more, splitting into countless strands as Kronos continued to walk. "This is a small model room I made that should help you understand. While I have the divinity of time, my control is also limited, as I cannot stop it forever. It will always flow no matter what. There are moments when these strands converge into a single point, and that is an unavoidable event, but the strands that branch out are the possible results. I'll be trying to teach you how to delay the arrival of said event in the form of time stopped." Kronos smiled. "Will there be enough time for me to grasp it, though? I don't know if the system timer will continue to tick since I've broken my restrictions right now." Shiro asked. "Yes, if you have a look at your system interface, you should be able to see that it is ticking slowly. While I cannot halt it completely, my powers are more than enough to slow it down. As for whether or not you can comprehend it, it's entirely dependent on you, since controlling time is unique in its execution. The method of controlling time could be different for everyone, since it's partially up to the user's aptitude as well. My method might not be something you can achieve, and at the same time, something you come up with might not be accessible for me." Kronos chuckled as Shiro nodded her head. Glancing over at her system interface, she could see that each second was now ticking by the minute, which meant that each hour she spent in this room would total to only a single minute by the system standard. "How are you achieving this?" Shiro asked curiously, but Kronos shook his head. Explaining it would only confuse you and disturb your learning. It's like telling you the concept of flying before you could even walk. Until we set up a proper foundation for you, I'll avoid talking about subjects that are too out of your reach so that you don't try to overachieve with your knowledge. I've had a few students in the past that died due to his curiosity. Kronos smiled sadly. He wondered if he could fast forward time, and I had explained some theories for him, seeing that he was so diligent in his studies. However, in doing so, he attempted an experiment all too soon. Since his area of control was small, he tried to fast forward time, which grew out of hand, and the kingdom he was living in was destroyed due to the passage of time. Walls crumbled to ash, people died, and left only bone. Time then proceeded to flow through his body, and by the time I had realized what had happened, it was already too late, and I couldn't do anything to save him. He sighed as Shiro didn't know what to say. I'm not telling you this to make this awkward or to make you pity me, but rather to caution you against excessive experimentation of time. Kronos explained. I understand. However, if we don't experiment, we won't be able to discover anything new. Yes, but do so with small advances. You have to remember that time is an unstoppable force. Even in the event that it looks as though time has stopped, it is only a moment being dragged on constantly. Time is still flowing, but the moment is stopped. Time is not a concept that can be halted, or at least, it can't be to my knowledge. I have not tried to experiment with this concept since the consequences could be huge, and as the god of time, there are things that not even I dare to tamper with. Kronos smiled. Now then, let me ask you, what kind of control do you want? Should you be too greedy with what you desire, then time will bite back. Focus your mind on a single specialty that you desire, whether that be reversal of time, pausing of time, divination, and so on. Pick one and stick with it. My situation is unique since my divinity has allowed me a close relation with the river of time, but you are different. Controlling time puts a heavy burden on you, and with how much you like to stress your body, it's best that you be careful. Closing her eyes at Kronos' statement, Shiro wondered what she wanted to do. Everything that he suggested was helpful in its own right. Time was a useful concept to have, and it is also because it is so convenient that trying to use it is risky. Like the story he told, if she's not careful, she could ruin herself with this very decision right now. However, controlling time was something she needed if she wanted to keep going. She was scared of the Watchman's speed and power. She was fearful of more powerful beings. But even if she is scared, she understands that she needs to overcome this, and her solution right now is to obtain greater power. It wasn't a proper answer, but it was something she decided on to calm her mind for now. She could take her time figuring out the right solution to her mental state, but as it stands, she still required power. Power to protect and power to conquer. In the case of the Watchman and Ikari, the power to destroy. But blind destruction would not do. It needed control. I want to learn how to pause time or drag out a singular moment so that it seems like time is paused, but I can move however I want. Shiro replied as Kronos nodded his head. That is indeed a convenient tool during combat. It is something that will help you a lot, but the risks are proportionate. Of course, I understand that you would have thought this through by now, so I won't waste more time asking about your intent. I will explain how I do this and use this strand to show you the process. How you interpret this is up to you. Kronos said as he waved his hand. Suddenly, a tier 8 magic circle appeared as the strands gathered towards him. This is our flow of time. When I activate my spell, I isolate a single moment and zoom in so that a single moment is forever magnified. Kronos explained as two cuts appeared on the strand. Magnifying the isolated piece, Shiro could see that the isolated piece stays the same size, but their perspective of that piece is being changed. This form of time stop is akin to enhancing your perceptive abilities and using mana or divine energy to reinforce your body so that you may move in this isolated place. While it seems like the isolated piece is not changing, it is actually stretching out slowly so that the burden on your body is lightened. As for the runes needed to achieve this effect, you need to make a string of runes to make sure the cuts in time doesn't shift ever so slightly, or else this isolated space will begin to collapse, resuming time, but in turn draining your life force to compensate. As Kronos continued to explain his method, Shiro's brain continued to work to its maximum efficiency. She was unpacking all of the information and simulating different situations and variables that could potentially happen that might affect the results. Constantly asking questions that will change the direction of her simulation along with methods that might achieve the same effect. For her, she wanted a method that doesn't burden her body but rather her surroundings. As for Kronos, he was impressed with Shiro's questions. All of them were large turning points or breakthroughs that he had to achieve what he had today. For her to pick up the key problems, this quickly meant that her analytical ability was off the charts. Seeing her eyes dart around the room, he knew that she was absorbing everything like a sponge, but the more he was impressed, the more he felt worried in his heart. He was afraid that her eagerness might become her downfall. With Shiro being unable to use mana or divine energy right now unless she consumed potions, they resorted to Kronos creating the simulation while Shiro explained the process. Most of the simulations were within Kronos' expectations, as he didn't say anything since Shiro learning for herself will make the later stages easier rather than him telling her the answers. However, hours into their study, Shiro furrowed her brows and stood up. Kronos, can we scrap everything we've worked on and try a different model? If we continue like this, my body won't be able to take the burden. Right now, I've already damaged my body fight after fight, and while I can heal, there's no guarantee that lasting effects won't remain. Instead of isolating a spot, why don't we inflate the moment? Like a balloon, I stand in the center while the surroundings expand. A short 1 centimeter line will stretch continuously while I, who stands in the very center of this balloon, does not move. A single moment is stretched out around me, but it does not strain my body. Shiro suggested as Kronos paused for a moment in contemplation. Creating a strand, he placed a mote of light in the center before following her suggestion. Explaining the possible runes needed, they watched as an isolated cut was inflated but the mote didn't move. It continued to expand without affecting Shiro/the mote of light, so the method was plausible. However, here's the problem: the limit of expansion and the cost of expanding the strand in this manner. While it may not affect your physique directly, the strain of mana required is a different matter of its own. Kronos frowned. Then let's make a battery. Space and time are linked. If I store mana beforehand and use that mana in the space to fuel the expansion, it would not affect me. Shiro replied. What about the limit then? What if it pops? Kronos asked as the expansion reached the limit and shattered. If you reach that limit and the strand breaks, there's a good chance that your body will be shredded up as the cause of this disturbance. Kronos said as Shiro stayed silent for a moment before opening her mouth. Yes, but this is the only way to use this power without straining my body more than needed. Plus, the drain of expanding the strand around me will be high, so I doubt that I'll be able to reach that stage in the first place. But just in case I do, how about we place a limiter on the runes then? We'll make it so that I can't surpass the set amount, and it will force me out of the time stop. Shiro suggested as Kronos furrowed his brows, but nodded his head. All right, I'll do some calculations and figure out a decent limit for you then, since I doubt you'll be satisfied with just 1 second. Kronos chuckled as Shiro nodded her head. In the meantime, you should work on improving your familiarity with the river of time. You can't use mana or divine energy right now, but you should get used to the feeling and sensing it. Otherwise, even if you have the theory down, it'll be hard for you to accomplish anything if you can't sense the river of time. Kronos said as Shiro nodded her head. Sitting down, she closed her eyes and tried to sense the strands surrounding her. This room was made just for their study session, so Kronos made sure to mark out the strands with his own energy. As long as she can pick up on them, it shouldn't be too hard for her to feel the presence of the strands. With Shiro trying to sense the strands, Kronos walked away so that he could put her theory to the test. Since his physique was a little special, he should be able to attempt her method without any problems. Flexing his fingers, a Tier 8 magic circle appeared around him as runes started to form on the layers. But the moment he tried to expand the surroundings, he noticed a big problem. The control needed for this is much bigger than his previous method. If one does not stay dead center, they'll also be subjected to the effects. You are either slowed down to a halt like your surroundings or accelerated to the next moment. Regardless, you will just be wasting a large portion of mana for nothing while also disorientating yourself. In a fight, this could be the moment that your enemy is looking for and end your life in a single slash. However, Kronos had to admit that even if the controls are delicate, the stress it puts on your body is much lower than his method. If anything, it could almost be called a massage. Cracking his neck, he figured that he might as well try to achieve some success with this method so that Shiro knows it's possible. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. While Shiro and Kronos were training in the chamber, Nyx recovered enough to sit up and glance towards Hemera. Feeling her heart squeeze in pain, Nyx sighed and brushed Hemera's hair. Where's Kronos? Nyx asked as Aurenas glanced over. He's with Shiro right now. She used her skill to increase her authority level and made an avatar to see us. Kronos is teaching her how to control an aspect of time right now. Aurenas replied while helping Tartarus research his wound. Wait, Shiro is here. Nyx widened her eyes in surprise. Furrowing her brows, Nyx sighed since it wasn't exactly reassuring seeing her backers in this state. How long has it been? Nyx asked. 2 weeks. You've been unconscious for 2 weeks this time. Next time it might become 3 weeks. Aurenas replied. 3 weeks. Nyx muttered but shook her head. Has Kronos found anything out about the Nitri we saw in Aria's fear? She asked as that was the only clue they had to where Aria's Tier 9 power came from. If they could find out the origin, they'll be able to find out Aria's history. Unfortunately, no. He's been trying to glance into the past, but his sight is limited. Aurenas shook his head. He tried divination with some help, but nothing of the sort popped up. It's as though the event never happened, but it definitely did since it's Aria's source of fear. Hearing this, Nyx fell silent. Her spell wouldn't work with illusions that the person had seen or something that they imagined, so it proved that this was a real event. But the fact that they couldn't find anything on it was strange. Plus, it didn't seem like Shiro knew what happened either since she hasn't reached godhood, never mind talking down to a goddess like that. It's strange. Nyx muttered as Aurenas agreed. Perhaps we should set it aside for now since we need to focus on healing Gaia and Tartarus. Their wounds are strange, healing is reduced, and even their divine core is damaged. Thankfully, there are signs of repair, but I'm afraid that if they were hit in the vitals, they would definitely die or stay injured with hardly any chance of recovery. Aurenas replied as he narrowed his eyes at the runes. It was as though it rejected divine energy entirely, so all they could do was use low-level spells to try to repair or stabilize everything while their divine core slowly repaired itself. Hi's all right. Nodding her head, Nyx stood up and started to help Aurenas with finding a counter for the runes. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. Shiro didn't know how long it's been, but she could sense Kronos' power flowing through her body. In the darkness, there were flickers of light that would appear in her vision, but whenever she tried to reach out to grab it, it would disappear. Swimming around her like fishes, Shiro felt as though she was in a lake, but was anchored down. Something stopped her from flowing freely like them, but there was this burning desire to reach out to them. She wanted to see through the darkness, but the moment she opened her eyes, she would be back in the room. She wanted something to let her interact with the river of time. Slowly, without her notice, faint red circuits appeared on her hand and started to travel up her arm. Looking at the flickering lights, Shiro continued to reach out to no avail. Waves upon waves of forces pushed her away, preventing her from reaching out as she wasn't able to come close to grabbing them. However, she suddenly felt a burning sensation on her arm, which flowed towards her neck. Just as she was about to open her eyes, she felt a blindfold of sorts cover her eyes. "Mother, let me help." A mature voice rang out softly as Shiro flinched for a moment. Gritting her teeth, it felt like a needle was stabbed into her eyes as pain filled her body, but it was short-lived before a cool sensation replaced the pain. "Who are you?" Shiro asked as she could no longer sense the other person, nor could she hear them. All she felt was the cool sensation in her eyes as her instincts told her to direct what little energy she had felt towards her eyes. Suddenly, the flickering lights started to become clear as strings could be seen floating around her. Looking at these strings, Shiro had the urge to reach out towards them. Just as she touched one of the strings, she felt Kronos tap her shoulder. Opening her eyes, she glanced up and saw Kronos' concerned expression. "Did something happen?" Shiro asked as Kronos sighed. "You were about to fast-forward time. How did you even come to this stage?" He asked with worry since she shouldn't have the energy to do this, yet he definitely saw that she was doing the motions required. That sudden spike in energy he felt was the river of time reacting. I did. I don't know." I just saw a string and felt the urge to pluck it. Shiro furrowed her brows. She didn't recognize the voice of the one who called her mother, but she definitely felt that something had happened to her eyes. Kronos, do you have a mirror? Shiro asked as Kronos nodded his head. Snapping his fingers, a reflective surface appeared in front of her as Shiro could see that there were faint purple runes around her pupil. Unless one looked carefully, they wouldn't notice it. Trying to push energy towards her eyes once more, she saw the runes flicker for a moment before dulling out once more. That's strange. Let me look at the system, Shiro muttered before glancing at her interface. However, her system didn't say anything about this, which was strange since the system usually recorded everything that happened. Explaining the situation to Kronos, the god furrowed his brows as this was indeed strange. For her to be able to suddenly interact with the river of time was definitely attributed to her eyes, which let her see the strands, but the origin was veiled in mystery. Kronos, are you able to transfer me some energy so that I can test out these eyes? Shiro asked as she wanted to find out what they are. Hearing this, Kronos paused for a moment before nodding his head. All right. Feeling Kronos' energy flowing through her body, Shiro redirected it towards her eyes as the runes started to light up. The strands started to appear in her vision once more, and it was akin to a spider's web. Looking at the strands in front of her, Shiro could see that they were split into 3 colors: light blue, dark blue, and pure white. There were countless strands in the room, and most of them were connected to Kronos. However, for the few that were disconnected from him, Shiro felt as though she could just reach out and touch them. What do you see? Kronos asked curiously as he could see the runes light up in her eyes. Each of the runes seemed to be composed of tiny tier 8 magic circles that reminded him of the magic circles he uses for his spells. I see countless strands: light blue, dark blue, and pure white. Most of these strands are connected to you, but there's 1 or 2 that I can interact with, or at least that's what I think. Shiro muttered with a frown as Kronos furrowed his brows before widening his eyes. Wait, I think I get it. What you're doing is seeing the strands that connect to the river of time. I interact with them using magic circles, my divinity, and my senses that I've trained over time since I cannot see their forms. Try to pull on one, but don't actually pull on it, so we can guess which color is which. Kronos asked as Shiro nodded her head. Reaching out towards the dark blue strand near here, Kronos closed his eyes. That one is the strand connecting to the past. He explained as he guessed it was colored a dark blue since it had already happened, and the possibilities are no longer there. There was no sign of change. Reaching out to the light blue strand, Shiro could feel the energy drain from her body in an instant as Kronos quickly transferred more energy. This one is the future. I use this for divination along with slowing time so that it seems like it has halted. Looking at the pure white strand, Shiro wanted to reach out to it, but the closer she got, the more her energy drained. Even Kronos had a difficult expression on his face as the energy consumption was increasing with each second she had these eyes activated. Stop. The last one is probably the present. While what you have is a boon, I doubt you can use it with ease. In just that short moment, you have already sapped away 40% of my energy. When you're a god, the energy you have access to is much bigger than what you have now. Even at your normal condition, I doubt you'll be able to sustain your eyes for more than a single second. Kronos furrowed his brows as he retracted his energy. Feeling a wave of fatigue hit her body, Shiro stumbled for a moment as the cool sensation faded from her eyes, but now she felt the strain. Similar to when she looks at a screen for too long, she had to close her eyes for a moment before they returned to normal. Seems like we can't rely on this for now, but in the future it'll prove to be helpful. Or at least I hope so, since the energy drain is rather insane. Kronos folded his hands as Shiro nodded her head. However, setting that aside, let's continue with your theory. I've managed to achieve a bit of success with it, but the energy drain is quite strenuous compared to my old method. The good news is that you were right with the fact that it wouldn't strain the body as much. Kronos smiled as he placed his hand on her shoulder. Waving his hand, a tier 8 magic circle slowly constructed around them as he furrowed his eyebrows in concentration. Creating a small orb of water in front of him, he allowed it to fall as the orb slowed down to a halt. Seeing the orb stop, Shiro reached out slowly as she tapped the surface. Droplets flicked off the surface as time resumed, but the moment it disconnected from her finger, it was frozen in time once more. Full. Breathing out heavily, the magic circles shattered apart as Kronos took a moment to regularize his breath. It's hard to stay in that state since I have to make sure we're dead center during the expansion, as mistakes are magnified in this state. Even if we're a little bit off center, it'll cancel the spell. But as you can see, in this state, we're the only thing still moving in the river of time. Anything that comes in contact with us will also resume, but once it separates from our body, it'll be slowed down as it is no longer in the center of the expansion. Most of your focus will be on keeping yourself in the middle, so fighting will be difficult. As you can see, even for me, the most I can do is make a droplet of water while standing still. Moving around and fighting is impossible for me in this state, Kronos said as Shiro nodded her head. That's enough for now. I just need to know that it's possible. I don't need to worry too much about the mental calculations since that's my specialty. If I create a process for myself, I can have a part of my mind focus on that while I fight. Shiro nodded as she made sure to analyze everything that she had seen. Do you want to give it a try? Kronos asked with a smile. Sure. Transferring some energy to Shiro once more, he took a small step back as Shiro breathed softly. Closing her eyes, she imagined herself to be in the center of a room with all the runes that she needed floating around her. She could remember the small details in the Tier 8 magic circle, and it was hard to decipher. She doubted that she'll be able to cancel a Tier 8 spell unless she brute forced it, which made it inefficient for battle, as the activation time will be much faster than her cancellation. She had to train herself so that she could analyze and decipher the Tier 8 magic in a single moment, or else she'll never be able to cancel out a Tier 8 spell during a fight, much less a Tier 9 should she fight Arya. Grabbing the runes, she started to piece them together before setting them aside so that she could work on a different part of the magic circle. Constructing the first quarter of the Tier 8 magic circle, Shiro could understand why Kronos was having such a hard time. There was so much balancing that she had to do across all of the runes in such a short time that it was akin to trying to fight the watchman while also cooking dinner. One side of the runes were volatile and needed delicate attention, while the other had to be wrestled down with strength. Trying to keep these two sides in check for just a single quarter of the magic circle spoke volumes of the difficulty. The fact that Kronos could smoothly construct it after a few short moments demonstrated his proficiency as the god of time. Ping. Shattering apart the moment her control wavered for a single moment, Shiro furrowed her brows before starting again. I'll keep supplying you with energy, don't worry, and keep going. Kronos smiled as Shiro nodded her head. ####. Shiro didn't know how long it took, but while her avatar didn't feel tired, her mind was feeling the fatigue pile up slowly. After her nth attempt at forming the Tier 8 magic circle, Shiro stumbled back as Kronos quickly caught her to stop her from falling. Seeing the avatar flicker, he sighed. Perhaps we should stop here. Your time is running out, and your avatar is reflecting that. Just take what you have learned so far and practice. Kronos smiled as Shiro nodded her head reluctantly. Disabling the room, he watched as Shiro's avatar disappeared before glancing towards the other gods. How was she? Auranas asked as Kronos sat down. It's crazy. Kronos sighed as Auranas raised his eyebrow. Crazy how? Nyx asked curiously. Have you ever seen a mortal creating a magic circle meant for gods? I didn't say anything since she seemed so determined. Her eyes never lost focus of her goal, and she almost completed it. For the first time in my life, I have almost seen a mortal reach the realm of gods through magic alone, without ascending. Kronos chuckled. How close was she to completing the magic circle? 80%. She managed to construct 80% of the magic circle. Once she gets used to the process of creating a god's magic circle, there's a high chance for her to use Tier 8 magic despite only being Tier 6. She's already broken the boundaries now that she has reached demigod state, a state that many queens and empresses do not reach, and now she's aiming even further beyond. If I didn't want to preserve my appearance, then this old man would have been seen as crazy in front of her, haha. Kronos laughed as he hadn't felt this passionate about a student achieving breakthroughs in a long time. The last time this happened, his prized student died to his research, so he restrained himself from repeating what had happened before. But seeing Shiro achieve such leaps in power caused his heart to pound with excitement. He wanted to experiment, to discover, too. Kronos, calm. You're getting a little excited there. Nyx interrupted his train of thought as she could clearly sense his excitement. I know that you're excited about what's happening, but you have to keep in mind, Shiro is the lifeline. We can't let her die. Even if it is experimenting to achieve breakthroughs, you cannot do so with the risk of Shiro dying. Nyx warned. But what about the possibilities that she brings? What if Kronos, Nyx shouted as she stood up with a frown. Sorry, seems like I have made a fool of myself. Kronos sighed as he was getting drunk on his passion and had lost himself for a moment. It's fine. Just don't put Shiro in danger and we'll be fine. Nyx nodded before focusing on helping Tartarus. Despite staying silent, Kronos' eyes burned with passion as Shiro had caused his inner beast to break free. All that was in his mind was the possibilities involving the river of time. He didn't need to be the one to achieve everything. Even as a spectator, he will be happy. They say that those that reach the peak are crazy in their endeavors. Whether that be the burning passion to constantly test themselves against the risks or discard everything in the pursuit of truth, the ones that reach the top have done everything. Kronos had one desire in his life, and that was to understand everything about the river of time, its possibilities, its mysteries, the powers a single entity could have over this powerful concept. And right now, he could see a path towards a part of the truth, and the one who is laying out the path is Shiro. Each step she takes in this subject brings him closer to witnessing everything. Even if he has to give up his divinity, as long as he can witness everything, he will be satisfied. But her container is too weak. It cannot hold the might of his divinity. He has to wait patiently, but it's fine. In the eyes of a being that cannot die due to the passage of time, a few years is nothing but a blink of an eye. He will wait with burning excitement to see what she can accomplish. The day he gives her his everything so that he can witness the thing that he wanted to pursue is the day he can leave the realm with a smile. Meanwhile, Nyx glanced back with a small frown. Kronos is becoming a little dangerous. I might have to deal with him if he gets too deep into his passion. I can't have him risking Shiro's life and putting the universe in danger. Nyx thought to herself since she could almost see the insanity brewing in his eyes. However, he is a great help to Shiro right now, so getting rid of him will bring no benefits. Plus, she is injured and her condition is unstable. Getting rid of him will be no easy task. Gods might be allies, but they won't bat an eye to killing each other the moment their goals collide. The only person she is really close friends with was Gaia, but Uranus, Tartarus, and Kronos all have their own goals. They only chose Shiro due to her persuasion, but now Kronos has his own goal. There might come a time where they'll become enemies, but for now, they were allies. ####. Opening her eyes, Shiro immediately deactivated her skill after making sure all of the lasting benefits were cancelled. Feeling a wave of shock go through her body, she tensed up for a moment before breathing out softly. Laying on the bed, cold sweat dripped from her forehead. Are you alright? Did everything go well? Nantion asked as Shiro nodded her head. MN, I managed to get some decent benefits. I'll tell you about them in a bit, but I want to take a shower first. I'm a bit of a sweaty mess. Shiro chuckled as Nantion nodded his head. After taking a quick shower, Shiro took a closer look at herself in the mirror. Focusing on her eyes, she could see the runes still being present, but she didn't think about doing anything with them, yet since the drain was too big. I wonder who that voice belonged to. It sounded masculine, but it didn't sound like Addie. Shiro thought with a frown. She tried entering her mana realm, but it was still blocked off, which meant that it was still undergoing evolution. Taking a few deep breaths, Shiro decided to stay for a little longer so that she could stop using Nantion as her emotional support. If this continues, she wouldn't be able to partake in long fights. Closing her eyes, she started to count the seconds as she could feel her mind becoming restless with each passing moment. Her arms started to shake as her breathing intensified. Looking into the mirror, she could see the shadows begin to twist as the edges of her vision started to darken. Shaking her head, she got changed and left the toilet before sitting on the bed and held onto Nantion's sleeve without saying anything. Understanding that she stayed in there for a longer period on purpose, Nantion didn't speak and just allowed her to take a moment to recover. He knew that she was trying to make some improvements with her own methods. Sorry about that, Shiro said after calming down. It's all right. Nantion smiled as Shiro brought out 2 cups of juice and offered him one. Taking a sip, she sighed out and started to explain everything that she's managed to accomplish with Kronos. How her eyes have changed and how she's been trying to construct the magic circle needed to pause time, but the requirements were harsh. Trying to keep everything balanced for long enough so that the magic circle was completed proved to be much harder than running Asharia. Do you have any candidates on who the voice might belong to? Nantion asked as Shiro shook her head. The only ones that call me mum are Ian, Lysandra, and Addie. Addie grows up in the future, but even then the voice this time sounded different. And I don't think I've adopted anyone recently, Shiro replied as she placed her hand on her chin. but they must be rather powerful if they can bless you with something that even a god might struggle with powering, considering the fact that it absorbed 40% of Chronos energy reserves with you just performing 3 actions. True. They weren't even full actions either, just me reaching out for the strands. Shiro sighed. Setting that aside, how will you be practicing the construction of the Tier 8 magic circle? Plus, don't you also need to be able to perform it in a snap if you want to use it in a fight? Nantion asked as Shiro nodded her head. I know. That's why I'm thinking of maybe carving a magic circle or a process on Sylvanes so that it can assist me when I want to pause time. This magic circle/process will help me construct a part of the magic circle so that I can have an easier time tuning the rest of it during combat. I won't be able to carve the full magic circle since parts of the magic circle change all the time. That's why it's so annoying trying to construct it. If I'm unlucky, I won't even be able to complete 20% of the magic circle before it shatters. Shiro shrugged her shoulders helplessly since there were still large parts of the runes that she didn't understand. Well, take your time with that. There's no need to rush. Nantion smiled as Shiro nodded her head. I know. I think I'm going to rest for a day or two before continuing with everything. I'm feeling a bit tired after everything. Shiro yawned as she laid on the bed. Oh right. I haven't asked this yet, but are the rewards for the new events as powerful as the first one? Shiro asked as Nantion paused for a moment before shaking his head. No, they're helpful and boosted their power by a lot, but in terms of potentially killing a god, no chance. Nantion replied. That's good then. I don't think this world can handle anything like that. Shiro closed her eyes. Also, how is Frost Giant's Pass? I haven't seen anything on it. Frost Giant's Pass still hasn't recovered, and I don't think it will for a while. The place is completely devoid of mana and life. That attack of yours pretty much removed any possibilities of anything staying in that area. We classify that as a dead zone now. Nantion smiled wearily as Shiro chuckled. That attack was a bit crazy, wasn't it? I think crazy is an understatement. Nantion shrugged. True. Say, are there any monsters that need to be killed nearby? I think I want to give live combat a try with some potions. I want to see how my body reacts in a real fight. Shiro asked as Nantion paused and nodded his head. There are. In one of the settlements that we've found and helped, there has been a report of an alpha dominating the forest near it, and hunts have become harder for the survivors. They've just asked for some help not too long ago, so I was thinking about giving this to Sheena. But if you want to undertake this, you can. Do we know what level it is? At least level 400, since it was forcing level 400s out of the forest. Nantion replied. Alright, 400 shouldn't be too bad. Shiro nodded as they prepared to leave at dawn. ####. Feeling refreshed after a good night's sleep, Shiro yawned before going into the toilet to get changed. Putting on her main outfit that Aram had created, she felt her breathing halt for a moment as she felt like she was dragged back to the moment when she stood in front of the watchman. It's just an outfit. What am I getting scared for? Shiro berated herself as she took a deep breath and opened her eyes. Brushing her hair out of her face, she stared at the girl in the mirror and nodded her head. It's just a level 400. Even if it's higher, it won't be on the level of him. Just tough it out. She muttered to herself before leaving the toilet. Did I wake you up? Shiro asked as she saw Nantion standing beside the bed. It's fine though. I had to wake up soon anyway. Want to get something to eat before we leave? Nantion asked as Shiro nodded her head. Going down to the food hall, she managed to catch sight of Ian and Lysandra, who were preparing to retrieve one of the fragments that Ian needed. Apparently, it was located near one of the Queen's settlements, so they had to be careful. Don't worry, Mom. We're not going to pick a fight. We've already pinpointed the fragment, so it's just a case of going there and retrieving it. Ian reassured as Shiro was worried about her safety. It's fine, Mom. The settlement is low importance, and we've already done our research. There's only one tier 6 guard in the settlement, so I'm going with Big Sis just in case. Lysandra smiled as Shiro reluctantly nodded her head. Fine, but any sign of danger, and you must come back, okay? I know, Mom. With Lisa coming along, even if we do get into a fight, not saying that we will, we should be fine. Ian grinned as she quickly finished her meal. What about you, Mom? You seem like you're getting ready for a fight yourself. We're going to go deal with a so-called alpha monster that appeared near one of Maddie's settlements. I want to see how my body reacts to a real fight since it's been so long. Hopefully I can fight like usual. Shiro smiled as Ian nodded her head. I think it'll be fine as long as you don't destroy the forest, since the people there might be in trouble if you do. Ian smiled. Do I look like Never mind. Taking into account what happened to Frost Giant's Pass, I suppose it's normal for you to worry. But it's fine. I won't be trying to change the landscape. Shiro chuckled. Talking to Een and Lysandra for a little longer, they made their way towards the teleport hall. Nantion camouflaged them so that the citizens of Asharia didn't see the two of them. Seeing how relaxed they were, Shiro couldn't help but smile since her city was serving its purpose and keeping the people here happy. Ready? Nantion asked as Shiro nodded her head. Stepping through the portal, Shiro saw that they were teleported to a similar building with the same style of architecture, but it wasn't created from nanotech. Just to keep things consistent, we had some sculptures and builders make sure each teleport hall at the settlements looked similar to the one in Asharia. Nantion explained. Looking around, Shiro could see that this city, or rather, settlement, was called Bryla. Most of the people here seemed like beast folk with a few demon guards keeping the peace. The Alpha is rumored to be in the western forest, not too far from the city. If we spend around 5 minutes traveling at a decent pace with our speed, we should be able to find it. Let's do that then. It's better to get rid of it early than delay things. Shiro smiled. Nodding his head, Nantion used his mana to help Shiro fly as the two of them departed for the western forest. Closing his eyes, he gave the entire forest a quick scan as it wasn't too difficult to locate the Alpha considering there was one huge mana signal deep in the forest. All of the monsters were running from that signal, so the chances of it being the Alpha that was ruining things was 100%. Even without using her mana sense, Shiro could tell where the monster was since there was a decent amount of blood LUSD coming from the center of the forest. Unless one can conceal their blood LUSD completely, it'll be hard to evade her notice. I found it. I can take it from here. Shiro smiled, pulling out a potion. MN, I will watch from the sky. Give me a signal if you need me. Nantion said as Shiro nodded her head. The moment she let go of his sleeve, she drank the potion and mana flooded her body. Feeling revitalized, Shiro stomped down and dashed towards the source of the blood LUSD at breakneck speed. Weaving through the trees with ease, she flexed her fingers and summoned her treasured sword. It's been a while since I've last held you in battle, Shiro muttered, seeing the rainbow-grade sword that had followed her and evolved over time. Seeing the sun reflect off the blade, she smiled before narrowing her eyes. Activating Boundary, she immediately sensed the monster that she was hunting. It was a draconic monster that had 2 bulky arms rather than wings and a long spiked tail that was buried partially underground. Upon sensing her presence, the monster's head snapped towards her direction as Shiro frowned for a moment. It's dead, she thought in surprise since she couldn't sense any aura from it. Despite having bloodl.u.s.t, the monster didn't have any aura. Closing her eyes, she activated analysis as the world around her lost its color and was deconstructed into wires. Ah, so it was a parasite. That makes sense. Shiro nodded, immediately halting her charge and taking a step back. A giant bone spike erupted out from the ground in front of her as she grabbed it with her hand. Breathing out a mouthful of cold air, she narrowed her eyes. Asterisk, KRRR. Freezing the bone in an instant. Ice started to travel up the tail as the monster quickly broke off the frozen parts. Seeing the lack of blood and the dried flesh, Shiro understood that the corpse must have been around for a while. Letting go of the bone, she walked towards the monster as each step she took would cause the ground to freeze around her. Snapping her fingers, snowflakes started to fall. Asterisk, KRRR. Exploding into large ice spikes upon contact with the monster. It quickly wrapped itself with bone to protect its body. Seeing that it has taken a defensive stance, Shiro raised her eyebrow. Trying to defend against her was kind of useless, especially since her sword ignored 80% of all armor. However, against this monster, even without the sword, she would be fine. Dashing forward, she pulled her arm back and punched the bone. Asterisk crack. Shattering it with a single punch, Shiro dismissed the sword and ripped a hole towards the center. Narrowing her eyes at the living corpse that turned towards her, Shiro shook her head. I figured that you'd put up more of a fight. What a waste of my time. Shiro clicked her tongue as she aimed her palm at the monster. Before it could even scream, a pillar of ice exploded out, crushing, freezing, then shattering its body into dust. Brushing the dust off her shoulder, Shiro made her way back to Nantion. It doesn't seem like I have any problems with a normal fight. My senses are normal, and even if the parasite tries to hide from me, I can still find it. Shiro shrugged as she snapped her finger. Off in the distance, Nantion could see an array of blades exploding out. That's good news then. He smiled. MN, I suppose my main source of fear is the Watchman. Unless I'm fighting against him, I shouldn't have any problems fighting. though I'll just be on a time limit. Shiro shrugged. We can work on that over time. Nantion smiled, nodding her head. Shiro did a small stretch before glancing towards the settlement that Madison set up. Do you want to shop around with me for a bit? Maybe pick out a dress or two for both Ian and Lysandra. Shiro offered with a smile. I don't see why not. Their selection might not be as good as Asharia, but it's the thought that counts. Nantion nodded his head. Spending a few hours shopping for some gifts for her two daughters, Shiro teleported back to Asharia with Nantion. It wasn't hard to find both Ian and Lysandra since they were having a small celebration in the food hall. Welcome back, Mom. How was the fight? Ian asked as she pulled Shiro to the table. It was a bit boring. What about your task? Easy as pie. Just one more fragment to go, and I'll be able to reach tier 6 as well. Ian grinned as Shiro patted her head. Well, I've brought back some gifts for both of you. Shiro smiled. Pulling out the dresses, Shiro handed them to the girls before pulling out another box. It was finely decorated with a small ribbon. Of course, I also brought back a local delicacy since I figured that you might like it. Shiro smiled. Seeing this, Ian smiled happily and gave Shiro a hug. Spending some time with Ian and Lysandra, Shiro enjoyed the rest of her day before returning to her room. Right then, I suppose I should try to make the magic circle a few times before I sleep since I'm not feeling tired. Shiro smiled, pulling out a few bottles of the mana potions.